There's a strange thing that happens when you spend your whole life being honest. People assume you're fearless in the sense that you are ready to face the consequences of throwing the unspoken obviousness straight into people's faces with the ingenuity of a 5-year-old who tells you that you're fat and bald in your 30s. In reality, you're just tired of carrying around the weight of unspoken words. Pretending always felt to me like holding my breath underwater, technically possible, but not for long, and never without side effects, like actually forgetting who you really are, or turning into someone you end up not really being fond of. I've always spoken my mind. Friends, family, coworkers, nobody was spared. Not out of cruelty, but because pretending felt like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It always pops back up eventually and punches you in the face, usually when everybody is watching or taking family pictures. I've always been the person who says the quiet part out loud, not because I enjoy the sound of truth hitting the floor like dropped cutlery, but because swallowing it felt worse than wearing an itchy sweater your grandmother knitted for you and you need to wear it every time she visits and pretend that you never take it off. Making an effort to look impressed with your colleague's recent promotion, or amused by your neighbor's bragging about cheating on his wife, or agreeable when a service desk agent puts you on hold for 30 minutes for the second time, is like wearing shoes half a size too small. You can walk in them, sure, but every step makes the way back home feel longer and excruciatingly painful when you're wearing the wrong boots. And yes, people judged me for it. They saw sharpness where I felt relief. They saw arrogance where I felt alignment. They saw coldness where I felt clarity. Honesty comes with its own kind of silence, the awkward kind, the kind that hangs in the air like cheap perfume after you say something true and everyone else suddenly becomes fascinated with their manicure. At first, those silences felt like standing alone on a stage in a painfully bright spotlight, but over time I learned to breathe inside them, to let the quiet settle like dust in a sunbeam, to understand that silence isn't rejection. Sometimes it's just people adapting to the temperature of truth and adjusting their filters to different thought granularity. Or it's the sound of the last dinner party you might be invited to. But the real price of honesty isn't what it costs you socially, it's what dishonesty costs you internally, and that's the part we rarely talk about. For all the honesty I gave the world, I wasn't always nearly as honest with myself, and that's where the real trouble began. Because it's one thing to tell someone else the truth, it's another thing entirely to admit the truth to yourself, especially when it threatens the story you've been living in. It can feel like you're messing up the colors of your personal rainbow. My ego used to throw a temper tantrum if I dared to admit to myself that I made an awfully bad choice, like being always available to a friend who's terribly busy when you ask him to grab a bucket of water and help you put out the fire of your burning piano in the living room. Being flexible when your neighbor next door is throwing a long, loud party in the middle of the week. Again, being generous past the point of common sense with people who actually need help, but never even bother to make the effort to breathe on their own because you're always close and willing to borrow your own oxygen mask for free. My life became more enjoyable even when I learned to be honest to myself about the small things, like quitting going to the gym 3 times a week when I actually hated it and decided that burning 100% of your belly fat in 2 weeks is a lame and superficial objective, or realizing that wearing tight jeans is stupid and uncomfortable even though I actually looked good in them. It's astonishing how heavy these small compromises become when they pile up. But the hardest truth, the one I resisted the most, I had to learn to admit to myself that I wasn't invincible, that I couldn't sort out everything, that I shouldn't always be the best or the most. I had to admit that I stayed in certain roles, the strong one, the fixer, the achiever, long after they stopped serving me. I learned to discover that slowing down actually feels like your windshield is suddenly clear and you can start to enjoy the view and see the whole picture. That sometimes I needed help with a flat tire, with a broken home appliance I had no idea how to fix, with an informed opinion that I was too proud to ask for. And that needing help didn't make me weak, it made me human. I had to learn to admit that disappointment hurts, and pretending it doesn't only makes the wound last longer. It's like trying to fix a bowl of soup when someone made a bad joke and loosened the salt shaker's cap. I had to admit that I'll deal with it later was just emotional procrastination. Feelings don't disappear. They wait for a quieter moment to resurface, and it takes more than a motivational speech or tuning into a higher frequency to digest them. I stopped using "I'm fine" or "I've moved on" as over-the-counter self-medication and let disappointment hurt and sink in and become a lesson for my future bowls of soup. I had to admit that minimizing my own pain by saying others have it worse didn't make me noble, it just made me invisible to myself. I had to admit that sometimes I cared what people thought, even when I pretended not to. But then I suddenly discovered that they'll blame and criticize no matter how you choose to do it. Like my mom's idea that I'm not supposed to eat my dinner alone or struggle with the 2 feet of snow on my driveway in January. The right way, the normal way, doesn't matter because there's always someone pointing a finger or whispering behind your back. So your way becomes the best way, like paying your neighbor's kid $20 to deal with the snow on your driveway and discover that 3 more kids are competing for the job the next time it's snowing. I had to learn to understand that it's not always my fault when reality didn't match my expectations and felt like walking in socks on wet grass. That being part of a broken family and wishing for unconditional love, protection, guidance, and fulfillment of the need to belong doesn't actually make me a needy child. I learned to enjoy reading a bedtime story on my own instead of imagining that my mom won't do it because I forgot to take out the garbage, and that comparing my reality with other people's reality is like watching a bad movie just because someone gave it a 5-star rating on their personal blog. I even had to admit the small, unglamorous truths, like the fact that quitting smoking is harder than motivational posters make it seem, that binge watching a series doesn't make me morally defective, and going on a blind date with someone a friend strongly recommended is a total waste of time. I stopped being angry at myself for being human in ways that are, well, universally human. And then came a truth I avoided even longer. I had to admit that I'm not entitled to see other people through my own lenses. For years, I believed experience gave me a clearer view, like I was standing on a hill while others were in the valley. But the older I got, the more I realized that every hill is just a valley from another angle. Everyone's map is drawn by different hands. Letting go of the idea that I knew better felt like putting down a heavy bag I didn't realize I'd been carrying. I had to admit that nostalgia can be dishonest too, that it won't bring back all the time that I wasted trying to fix bad relationships, pursuing empty goals, or wasting energy and creativity with unfulfilling jobs that offered the illusion of security and stability. I learned to quit rewriting the past to make it softer or more palatable than it really was. And maybe most humbling of all, I had to admit that sometimes I genuinely don't know what I'm doing. Not in a dramatic existential way, more like walking through a familiar room in the dark. You know the furniture is there, you just can't see the edges. I had to learn that uncertainty isn't a failure, it's simply the mind asking for more light. Sometimes I need more time. Sometimes I need more information. Sometimes I need to sit with a decision until it stops feeling like a moving target. Admitting that felt like loosening a knot I'd been pulling tight for years. And slowly, I learned something that surprised me. Life doesn't require a grand mission or an outstanding purpose. It doesn't demand that we change the world or leave a legacy carved in stone. It's okay to be forgotten. Sometimes the most honest life is a simple one, lived with awareness, curiosity, and a willingness to learn from the small, ordinary moments. Sometimes enough is actually enough. If any of this sounds familiar, if you spent years being honest with everyone but yourself, you're in good company. Most of us weren't taught how to sit with our own truth. We learned how to perform strength, not how to inhabit it. Take care of yourself and be honest, gently, patiently, with the person you spend your whole life with, you. Thank you for passing by. Over and out.